Alright everyone, it's time for just another dedicated little diatribe against socialism because I gotta drive the point home because it's an important topic to talk about. I've said for years that the most important fight that we're fighting is to prevent censorship on the internet. On the main communications mode for now most of mankind at this point, it's the majority of mankind is at least somewhat connected to the internet. A lot of people, at least a sizable minority within the West, are constantly cued into it. Like literally there is not a moment that they're awake that they're not connected to something that's connected to the internet. I feel like a Luddite for not yet owning a smartphone, number one, and actually being able to go outside, disconnect completely for a couple of hours, and just farm some turnips or something. But I wanted to think about just how dumb censorship is. When you really think about it, the first thing would be, I pointed this out, there's never been a case in human history where censorship has actually been imposed for benevolent reasons. Never. They can use all the family-friendly terms they want, but in retrospect, 20, 50 years later, we always look back at periods of book burning, of censorship, like the FCC and stuff. We look back at it and say, well, that was like a witch trial. It was dumb. It was prefaced on ignorance. People either blew something out of proportion, like with metal music. They thought it would make people worship the devil or whatever. They were wrong. We now realize that they're wrong. And we look at censorship of that material 30 years on now, in some cases, as far as the peak censorship, we're actually closer to 40 now, which it's sad. Metal now, golden oldies with Ozzy Osbourne, which will never happen, thankfully. Yeah, you never sell out when your songs are that extreme, I suppose. But you get to the point where you look back at some of the censorship in history and like, wow, what a surreal time. But then you look at the present. Is it really any different now? It wasn't that long ago that they were talking about, well, we need warning stickers on Eminem music, we need warning stickers on Van Halen, we need to prevent little Jimmy from listening to this music. And it's like, a lot of it, the biggest problem is people don't want to take responsibility. When you really think about it, all of this shit has been caused because parents don't want to spend enough time with their kids, because people aren't cued in enough about their communities, like their neighbors and stuff, and so they try to blame some external force for the societal breakdown they themselves are causing. Like the parents are too lazy to monitor little Jimmy's CD collection, and so they want warning stickers put on things so they don't buy the wrong music, because they can't let little Jimmy hear about an orgasm. They can't let little Jimmy hear about marijuana. Little Jimmy will get the wrong idea if he hears about any religion other than Jesus worship, and so they need the little sticker to make decisions for them. Or like they go to the movies, little Jimmy's not allowed to see the slasher flick. It's rated R, little Jimmy, so it's bad for you. I'm sitting here thinking to myself, why? And it's like little Jimmy probably is going to watch it anyway. He'll figure out some way. Especially, again, in the age of the internet. What the fuck are you going to do to stop it? You might as well just get rid of all censorship because it's no longer meaningful. We're going to kick you off the website for having the wrong political opinions. Oh, just fucking use Gab, dude. I'll go to Minds. I'll do whatever I want. People are always going to have their opinions. They're always going to be heard. If they have the wherewithal to resist at all, censorship no longer even has any fundamental meaning to them. And they try constantly to try to prevent people from having the wrong opinions. And as we've seen throughout time, usually that wrong opinion is either at least not as bad as it was cast by the establishment, or it was even the virtuous opinion. Like back, years and years ago, they're trying to censor somebody who's like a gay advocate back in the 70s, and now in retrospect we say, oh, well, they were the heroes the whole time. Yeah, but they were considered purveyors of disease back then. They were considered purveyors of mental illness. They were considered a threat to society. Avert your eyes, little Jimmy, it's a terrible thing. Abortion, another similar issue. Maybe a more debated issue. Book burning. The idea of like, back in the nifty 50s or something, well, this is commie literature. Why? Because the government says so. Come on, kids, let's burn all the books. Let's be ignorant together. Let's be a good time. With music, like when the Beatles, when John Lennon came out and said, well, we're like, what did he say? We're bigger than Jesus, and I don't know which will go first, us or Jesus. And it was like a tongue-in-cheek classic Lennon joke. He wasn't even really being blasphemous. People went nuts. I think this was, 64 or 65 or something, and they started burning Beatles albums, and he's like, oh, I didn't mean that at all. People are blowing it out of proportion. And it's like, they're doing more than that. They were just feeding their own ignorance. Meanwhile, those same very religious children were going out behind the church and fucking each other the whole time, so I'm not sure that the Beatles caused their problem. I think they had problems to begin with. A few years later, they were all dropping acid, and then they fucked even more. And then they're listening to the Beatles, but it was the good Beatles. Good Beatles begins with like Rubber Soul era, when they start using pot. And then they start using psychs, and it gets better. And then they sort of, I guess, black out, and they wake up around the Let It Be era, and they just hate each other, and you can sort of feel that. And it's, I don't know, Let It Be is the most overrated album of all time. Unpopular opinion, I fucking hated it. I hate the song, I hate the album, everything on it sucks other than what it was, the one song that Paul did about Yoko, actually. Jojo was a man who thought he was a woman. I can't even remember the name of the song at the moment. This is the only good one on the whole fucking album. Give me the White Album, you know, The Beatles, the premiere album. Give some Sgt. Pepper, something like that. I'd rather watch Yellow Submarine to tell the truth. I'd rather listen to Ringo Starr, the classics, than listen to Let It Be, to tell the truth. I know it's a little bit of a tangent, but I mean the Beatles, you know, are heavily censored at the time. Metal, rock and roll, and like Elvis Presley, like when they were, you know, showing, you know, video footage of Elvis, they would always cut him off here, right? Because they didn't want girls to see him swing his hips around. Oh my God, that's like a pelvic thrust is like a sex thing. Our girls they'll have wet dreams. They'll have orgasms. They'll touch themselves. They'll get cummy or something. It's terrible. Oh my God. They'll have sex. Because that's unnatural. You know, you're supposed to sleep in separate beds. Afterwards, you know, you have to procreate. Not supposed to enjoy it. Don't you dare fucking moan, by the way. My God, to the moon, Alice. And then you go back to your separate beds. You pray for an hour for forgiveness for the sin of, you know, orgasming, I guess. Except the woman never had to worry because, you know, dudes back then, they were ignorant. Probably couldn't get them to orgasm. Supposedly, wink, wink. Some of them knew what they were doing, I'm sure. Must have been a funny time back then. Fucking hypocrites. Censorship is always prefaced on hypocrisy and stupidity. It's always prefaced on ignorance, and it's usually malevolent. Like I made a video, I think this was last year. Specifically, it starts off, you'll have some societal problem or perceived problem, and then quickly it gets co-opted by opportunists. They drive it into the ground. This is why a moral panic will always destroy itself, because it'll enter a purity spiral because it's been fed by a bunch of power structures. Corporations will use it for virtue signaling to sell a product. Politicians will use it to virtue signal for votes, and so forth. Churches often co-opt it, religious movements, and they feed that enormous sort of rising bubble, and eventually it pops, and then it recedes. And then everyone pretends like they weren't part of it, unless they're so heavily embedded in it that they have no choice but to cater to a dwindling niche audience. Like you think of a Bob Larson or something. Like he makes his name during the Satanic Panic. He's kept the shtick up. He's still an exorcist and stuff. I can't imagine he makes as much money as he used to, but he's still got a good thing going. He sort of goes along with it. By the way, I do not believe that he believes most of the shit that he says. It's a showmanship sort of thing. Opportunists and showmen always destroy the moral panic, which is, they make money actually both promulgating and eventually crippling the moral panic. So they're doing good and evil at the same time and getting rich doing it. It's a very interesting phenomenon. But yeah, censorship is always bad. So remember, kids, your parents and schools and all authority figures, they are out to destroy your life, and you should resist them. In legal ways, of course, non-violent and acceptable ways. Don't break the law. It's a terrible thing to do. No, bad people do that. You know, bad people were the one, you know, doing the sit-ins during the 50s and getting arrested. Like, they were criminals. Oh my God, they desegregated things. It was against the law. Shit, you know. Because activism is almost always illegal. That's about all. Peace out.